on this session. I have a very privileged guest, a very good friend of mine, Gaurav Markanda, a renowned management consultant working with the Big Four and has been working with a lot of large Indian corporates running their respective HR transformation programs. And I invited him to discuss with us today one of the most important topics going on the HRO desk, which is how to do organization and cost optimization. So without taking much of my time and your time, and I will open the floor to Gaurav. Gaurav, over to you. We have a lovely slide from your side, so please take it on. Over to Gaurav. Thank you very much, Gaurav, for your time. Appreciate your time and appreciate everybody's time who has joined us. Thank you very much. Over to you, Gaurav.
Thanks, Mandeep, and everyone, thanks for joining us today. Mandeep mentioned this whole topic of cost optimization, and I was like, maybe I have a thought or two to share on that. And this came from some work that our team had done. One of the participants here with us, Nidhi, she played a pivotal role in connecting with various organizations to do this, along with another colleague of mine, Rahul Jain. So we were able to connect with almost 9 industries or sectors and fairly large companies and medium-sized organizations as well, and came across a stream of thought which was really talking less on cost optimization, but how do we manage our costs in a sustainable way? Because we keep hearing of all these retrenchments happening, furloughs happening, everything that is so-called COVID induced. But if you really look a little deeper, it's not just COVID induced. It was something that was waiting to happen. We had a slowdown prior to COVID-19, and it has just manifested itself in its entirety across sectors right now. So as we looked at this, and Mandeep mentioned that, he's looking at what role a CHRO can play in cost optimization. And that's where I thought of, really looking at 4 questions. Which cost does a CHRO have a mandate for? Is it just the manpower cost, L&D cost, or does the person look after some other costs as well? And does the CHRO really control the cost, or is a custodian of budgets which are laid down, set by the business leaders? Third question to my mind was, should CHROs extend their contribution to managing organizational resources? Is it that they're only accountable for human resources, or what we say that at a leadership level, you got to cut across functional boundaries and look at organizational resources overall? And finally, is HR only a cost center, or does it also contribute to the top line? And I'm not talking about, how do we contribute alone? I'm first of all asking a question. Do we approach HR as someone who adds to the top line, or is just a cost center? So these were the questions that were there, and one thought that maybe you could look at some frameworks, some ways of managing costs and also supporting organization growth in a sustainable way. I think over the next 30 odd minutes, I'll try and address some of these questions. We'll have a question answer at the end, but I will request you to share your questions and thoughts as we move along so that we can keep it a more involved conversation here. Mandeep, you could help me with the questions that we receive in the chat.
Yeah, I will do that. I'll do that. I'm just saying some people are having trouble with the logging in. I'm just helping them to log in. So you continue, please.
Okay. So if we look at organizations across board, the slowdown and pandemic have made their vulnerabilities visible. Whether you look at a tenure of the organization, it's a startup, or it's a 120, 140, 180-year-old organization, whether it is a sunrise sector or a sunset sector, whether from a valuation perspective, it's a a startup which has a seed capital, a family and friend capital coming in, or it's a unicorn. or even, the organizations which were financially making losses to organizations which were sitting on huge cash reserves prior to this whole slowdown and pandemic. The severity of the crisis was felt equally irrespective of the context of an organization. So whether you are a auto sector company, whether you are a food sector company, there has been an impact, right? And yet, interestingly, within the same sector, some companies are doing better than the rest. And the question that comes up is, what is it that they are doing differently? And if you were to look at these organizations in the last 30, 50 years time span, these organizations have repeatedly done better in tough times. While the whole sector may be down, but specific companies have always done better in tough times. So what really differentiates them? That's something that one needs to reflect on. So these are, when we say there are companies which have over the years really focused on developing themselves and coming out more resilient, it to me is akin to someone trying to do fat reduction. I'm just drawing a parallel between cost reduction and fat reduction. If you're wanting to lose weight, it's not a one-time initiative. It's a way of life. There is a discipline and rigor required to be able to do that. And depending on organizations, now this image on the left side of the screen, if you look at it, it's looking at revenue and profitability of a company, and on the y-axis, and the costs or expenses incurred on the x-axis. We need to examine where our organizations are in this matrix and determine what kind of an intervention we need now. But we may do a surgical intervention right now, but unless until we don't do it with a mindset of really changing the way we work in an organization, the way we approach the market, this cost reduction initiative will not bear fruit. 95% of cost reduction initiatives do not meet the objective that they're set out to meet.
Oh,
they end up actually depleting organizations' bandwidth to create value. Just to give you an example, when we look at auto sector over the last 5 or 8 years, if you notice, whenever a company has come up and launched a new model, its sales have gone up, while those of competitors has come down. Whether it was, Renault Duster when it was launched, it was overbooked. When it was Ford EcoSport, it was overbooked. When it is MG Hector, it is overbooked. So it's not a recent phenomenon. Anyone who comes up with an innovative new product, customers are tending to move in that direction. Now, let's look at the situation wherein we are looking at cost reduction. So if we start reducing manpower, if we start cutting our L&D spends and R&D spends, it takes away the very ability which helps us survive. It takes away the very ability to grow. So cost reduction not only harms you now, but it is going to harm you in the future as well. So when we are looking at cost reduction, it's really about saying, I need to balance cost rather than reduce cost, because the mindset then determines how you are going to approach and where you're going to approach. We'll talk about that as well as we move along, as to how organizations can sustainably, with a focus on viability, reduce their costs. While we're looking at costs, I just drew another parallel. In the history of world since late 1800, whenever a country has tried to develop the tallest, highest building, immediately after completion of that building, the country has gone into recession. Repeatedly. Every time someone has tried to make a taller building, it's gone into recession. If you were to look at Petronas Tower, I'll take recent history, which we all would be familiar with. 1997, the building was completed. The world went into the Asian crisis around that time. Similarly, 2004, the Asian crisis spillovers was still hitting Vietnam and the whole Southeast Asia. Burj Khalifa came up in 2010, and that's around the time 2008 to 2012 when the Dubai economy really crashed. They had to actually take loan from Abu Dhabi. That's why the building is called Khalifa, after the ruler of Abu Dhabi, and not after the ruler of Dubai. So,
That's a good one.
Because that was one of the conditions they had set. And so what's in it for organizations, and I've seen across board organizations which have gone ahead and spent excessively on extravagance, massive corporate offices. Then you don't know where the expenses are going, and that's what hits you later. I won't get into names of companies here because unfair to do that, but enough IT companies or ITES companies, e-commerce companies, which got substantial funding. One of the first investments they did was setting up corporate offices, and now they don't have a business to run through which for which they need that office now. So how do you what is that frugal approach that you adopt when you're spending while still retaining the aesthetics, the hygiene factors, the functionality? I think that's more important, and minimalism that's why gaining ground, beginning from Japan and slowly attracting people the world over. So it's the way we approach our work, it's the way we approach our organization, the way we approach our customers. So this was one of the learnings that I thought we could draw from certain failures that countries have faced, how it impacts companies. So as we look at this VUCA world, we keep hearing this term, but ultimately it basically means we are not understanding what's going around. And that's exactly what's happening in the financial domain in terms of economic recession, unprecedented loss of revenues. Speaking to some of the leaders, they mentioned that no one had ever imagined a zero revenue month, right? And these are companies which may be running multi-million dollars revenue a month, right? Maybe three-digit $1 million revenues a month. Operations, supply chain disruption because of lockdowns, because of various suppliers going literally broke, if I can use that word, because of the pandemic, and the whole the availability of parts is becoming an issue. Availability of raw material is becoming an issue, and there is no rule book to manage this, because all those rule books that were made were just in time. They were around ensuring systemic flow, but they did not look at how we would manage when there is a disruption. And which is right, because these systems are made so that there is least amount of disruption, but then there is a contingency like the one that we are experiencing right now. So new ways are emerging now if you look across organizations, and whether it is running operations, running your manpower resources, all that, people are finding innovative ways. As far as people are concerned, livelihood is impacted. There is isolation and anxiety. I mean, I can see Mandeep and I can see myself on the screen, and we have no team members with us right now, right? So there is isolation, there is anxiety impacting people. We are social animals by definition, and we are not getting that space. So how is it impacting us? These would be visible in not very immediate future, but probably a little long drawn future. We might see impact of how this isolation, remote working is impacting us. And maybe we create new ways of working in this remote sense, and new skills are required, new methods are required, new tools are required. And that's what a CHRO would need to play a critical role in, along with the inputs they receive from all employees. So if we look at cost reduction, and I've taken both the business view and the HR view here, It's really around portfolio rationalization. It begins right from the top. I'll put the whole thing here. Now, at an organizational level, when you're doing cost reduction, manpower cost, depending on the sector you are in, can range from 3% to about 70-75%. And if I was to say manufacturing setup, it will range between 6% to about 12%, and service sectors, it would be much higher. If you are reducing only the manpower cost by virtue of retrenchment, salary cuts, furloughs, it doesn't really impact your P&L so strongly. What would impact your P&L strongly is really your portfolio rationalization. Organizations, to capture market share, capture each customer's wallet, if I can say, have gone ahead and diversified into multiple products that they would provide. Now, the moment we do that, we are spreading our resources thin. Unless, and therefore, if you look at any company, there is a Pareto principle applicable that only 20% of the products are adding to 80% of your bottom line. Unfortunately, organizations over the years have focused on, and they're obsessed with, revenue or valuation. Whereas the obsession in business has to be around profitability. Otherwise, it is not sustainable. So how are we going to make this obsession there? For example, I may be running a company which provides either a product or a service, and we have multiple variants of it. How do we do this, right? We need to rationalize, we need to focus, we need to specialize. If we try to become everything for everyone, we will never retain profitability. And this can be tested across a retail sector, it can be tested across airline sector, across health sector, across auto sector, services sector. You pick up any sector, this would be applicable. Depending on what your product portfolio is today and what you plan for tomorrow, your talent portfolio needs to be rationalized. What capabilities do I need to build? What capabilities do we invest in right now? So even in this time, it is actually the best time to invest in certain resources. Hewlett Packard, for example, when it was said there was a recession, and they took it as an opportunity to hire the best talent available in the country, and they grew. Kellogg, for example, made headways because while every other company said people don't have money, let's cut down our advertising spend. They said, let's increase our advertising spend so that people are aware of the discounts available and therefore they will come and buy it. So it's the way you're looking at it. Is it a growth mindset, or is it somehow manage yourself? Now, organizations from the Western Hemisphere would still demonstrate some level of growth mindset. Organizations in India would be limited to demonstrate growth mindset because we do not have abundance mindset, right? And let me give you an example on that. And this is called the last piece syndrome. If we go to someone's house and there is a last piece of a snack item lying on the plate, no one picks it up. But in the West, people will not think twice. If they want it, they will take it. It's not that they're insensitive to the guest or to the other people sitting there or the host. It's just that they believe there will be more lying in the fridge or the deep freeze. We believe this is actually the last piece. There is nothing more in the kitchen. There is nothing more in the cabinet, right? Yeah. Now, if we approach our business without abundance mindset, how will we drive growth mindset, right? So this is where I think while Microsoft and Google are these days talking a lot about growth mindset, but in India, we need to adopt growth mindset. Culturally, we need to create abundance mindset in our teams. And that's a huge role that CHROs can play. Then comes, cost reduction wise, what's my geographic spread? What is my customer serviceability? There are people who want to service everyone everywhere. They think they're selling Coke, where they say a Coke should be an arm's length away. But that's not how it is done. The serviceability cost is huge. Just to give you an example, I'm an auto fan, so I end up picking up examples from there. So, for example, in cars, people generally ask, how come Rolls-Royce is so expensive, right? And how expensive can an engine become? How expensive can an interiors be, in a car? But it's not for that they're charging you. Along with the car, they offer you a satellite phone, and they say that wherever you are stranded in the world, right, you will get a replacement car in 4 hours. Now, imagine the network that needs to be established to be able to service this commitment. So the moment we are looking at servicing our clients, we need to look at what are the costs we are incurring to service them. So at a business level, a lot of decisions need to be made. I talked about product rationalization, portfolio rationalization rather, and also our geographic spread and customer serviceability. Given that HR needs to work with leaders on centralization, decentralization, outsourcing, work from home, geographic footprint, all these things will help in cost reduction. The last one, the how part, we end up focusing on HR business processes, on structure, manning, talent supply chain, various AI-enabled, machine learning-enabled digitization and automation within HR. A lot of companies doing a lot of work in that space. But a question which any HR leader really needs to put to other leaders in the company is, how is it that we have tweaked our capabilities or our systems in a way that whatever we were doing last year, we are doing with lesser resources this year?
Wow.
So for example, I am in consulting business, and let's say I do X amount of revenue each year with about 20 people. Now, if I'm going to do X amount of revenue next year also with 20 people, then I'll start making losses because I need to provide for the increments, etc. in the year, other inflation costs going up. So unless until an organization learns to absorb the cost of inflation in its cost of operations, it cannot be sustainable. Beyond a point, you cannot pass it on to a customer. Right? So this is where organizations talk about it in terms of KRA KPIs, but I've seen many organizations struggle with really setting what should be the right KRA KPI, because they start looking like additive numbers. For example, sales staff. There are 20 guys, let's say, selling $1 million each. So their boss's target is 20 million. Now that's not what the boss's target should be, and how the target for each guy below increases each year. And beyond a point, one man cannot draw more than a particular number of visits to clients. So how do I make my client visits turnaround time better? So you can pick up each function like this, whether it's sales, whether it's finance, HR, marketing, operations. And we need to look at how we are raising the overall productivity of the function each year. Right? And if we are able to do this, we definitely, as HR folks, have a deep impact on the cost. And it is not coming out of manpower reduction. That is just one tool. And the way I look at it, that is not even 5% of the cost reduction that an HR head can do. There is a much larger cost head they have a direct contribution to. So now coming to the HR head from a functional perspective, the areas that they work on is organization structure. They're looking at compensation. They're looking at HR policies. The survival mindset which kicked in because of the slowdown in COVID-19. Immediate answers to these areas were retrench, reduce, cost focus. Whereas sustainability mindset says retain and redeploy, dynamic and flexible compensation, and HR policies which lead to further engagement. It is not an either or scenario. We need to balance the two. So yes, there will be some retrenchment, but yes, there have to be people and skills which need to be retained and redeployed. Compensation, there will be some reduction, but there has to be an upside also. I used to discuss this with a lot of my friends and colleagues, and I said in 1930s, Keynes economics defined what profit is and what wage is. You know, we all would have read this in our B schools at some point in time. And he said wages are towards, it's a contractual payment for the hard work or effort that you're putting in for someone. So you're putting in time and effort for which you are getting remunerated. Profit is you're being remunerated for the risk you're taking. Now, this is the theoretical definition of wage and profit. Let's look at current scenario. If I am reducing wages of people because of COVID-19, as a shareholder, I am passing off the risk to maintain profit by reducing salaries of people. So I am effectively making wages as profits, right? And the moment you do that, the whole contract you have with people is violated. I'm not talking about the legal contract. I'm talking about the social contract you have with people. And this is where distrust comes in, because fundamentally risk was of the shareholder, not of the employee.
Right? Well said, well said.
But at the same time, I'm saying, yes, you'll have to reduce salaries because you'll need to sustain. So it's not either or, you have to combine the two and take people together. When we talked to about 20 companies in 9 sectors, they had a revenue of over 2.5 lakh crores. This was as recently as, I think, July, in the month of July. And we found that they are suggesting that 19 trends are emerging for business strategy, structure, systems, processes, and remuneration systems, in which some trends are reversing, some trends are accelerating, and some new trends are emerging. Right?
Okay.
So if we look at business strategy, earlier the strategy was invest and grow. Now it is conserve cash. Earlier it was high engagement with customers. Now it is saying low touch point engagement with customers, right? So there are shifts that are happening. What is further getting accentuated and being done more is diversification of products or services. Because what I was selling earlier is no longer selling. So I end up trying to sell something else. Now, again, organizations need to be careful. Are they deviating from their core capabilities in this diversification process? Because if they are, they will not succeed in this. Interestingly, R&D spends are going up, right? While the general sentiment is that no, R&D spends are also coming down, but in the survey across the sectors that we were looking at, R&D spend has gone up. And new trend in the business strategy is really develop new sales channels. Now, as a HR head, when I look at this, I need to quickly think of what interventions I need to put in place so that we are ready to serve these requirements. If there are new sales channels, let's say e-commerce is becoming a major channel for distribution for me. Therefore, digital marketing is going to pick up. Therefore, the entire supply chain will change, because let's get into a bit of supply chain issue. The supply chain today may have been getting generated, the demand part, not from the final customer, but there was an intervening channel which would estimate the demand and tell you, right? Now you're going to depend on AI on a e-commerce platform to predict that demand for you. So what skills are required to manage that data, to understand that data, and to make decisions, business decisions to drive performance and profitability? Structure-wise, sorry?
Very good, very good.
Structure-wise, we looked at decentralization to centralization. Everyone was talking about decentralization pre-COVID. everyone is saying centralization. We need to understand why. Because there is so much uncertainty, leaders are increasingly being expected to convert that uncertainty into concrete, tangible action rather than direction. So because it is that uncertain right now, and therefore centralization is kicking in. Divisional and team-based structures are going to become more prevalent. Shared services is going to get an impetus. Roles and responsibilities are being relooked at, and reduction in spans and layers is going to be a further focus area. So if you increase the span of control by double, you reduce the oversight cost by 60%. What I mean by that is, if I today manage 4 people, tomorrow if I start managing 8 people, the cost of reviewing 8 people comes down by about 60%. So organizations are now looking at these matrices and trying to drive some cost initiatives. And yes, the new trend of remote working or work from home, we have seen RPG group declaring that this would be the way forward. Facebook has declared that more than 50% of their manpower will work remotely from tier 2 and tier 3 cities. Because if you have to work in Silicon Valley, the wage bill is fairly higher because of the cost of living. If people are going to work from tier 2, tier 3, the compensation levels could get readjusted. So a lot of changes happening around us in terms of how structures would begin to emerge in organizations. Systems and processes, we have digitization, use of gig workers, and low touch, high frequency engagement. In terms of remuneration systems, we are seeing annual increments to cost containment and high fixed pay to variable pay. There is a greater focus on health and wellness. You can't afford a COVID case in your place of work. Non-monetary rewards are picking up again, and PMS for remote working is being re-examined. What kind of KRAs would we have? How do we take care of interdependencies? How would we determine variable pay at the end of the year? So these are things which many organizations and HR folks are right now working on. So as we looked at this, business strategy is around conserving cash, emergence of flexibility as a strategic capability for influencing growth, and accelerated adoption of digitization. In terms of organization design, it's again agility, flexibility, and innovativeness to the primary design goals. Roles need to be reimagined, and optimization of workforce. And remuneration system is flexible remuneration system and plateauing curves, linking pay to performance and employment mix. So given the time, I would come to specific areas. I'll not focus on business strategy. I will come straight to organization design and then focus a bit more on the remuneration part.
Thank you.
Well, just skip this. In terms of structure, we just saw that there is a structural shift to team-based structures, faster adoption of shared services, and manpower rationalization through review of span levels, unique value addition, etc. So organizations are really looking at how people talk to each other. Fundamentally, when we are saying team-based structures, organizations are adopting a way of working wherein they're saying that no decision should be pending for more than 24 hours.
Wow.
We need a structure that supports that. So therefore, the way of working is changing, way of communication is changing, way of information flow is changing. The way people are to be equipped to interpret that information, MIS, the response times, etc. is changing. So, and this is where HR has a huge role to play. Coming on compensation, when we looked at the survey results, we found, and I'm looking at March 2020 as the time around which these decisions were being made in some of the Indian companies. We found 37% companies are saying backward bending curve, which is salaries are going to get reduced. 29% said it's a plateau curve, no further increments. 17% said marginal selective increase. Few people, very few people to be given the increase. And last but not the least, notional increase for everyone. Of course, sectorally, it's different. There are certain sectors which have gone ahead and announced increments, and there are exceptions of that kind in certain sectors as well. But largely, this is the trend line. And within this trend line, if we see, there is a trend across senior, middle, and junior management. So middle management is the safer space for people. It is in the senior and junior management where reductions are happening, right? But when we are looking at reduction, let's not look at reduction, which is an absolute reduction of X amount to Y amount, right? We need to look at certain frameworks to see where this compensation level should be. And I'll talk about that. I'll skip this, which is really about variable compensation, non-monetary rewards, and individual to team-based sales targets that are coming in. So really at the organizational level, we are talking about decision making. We are talking about decisions not getting delayed beyond 24 hours. So when we are manning these organizations, we need to be sure that people at different levels are contributing uniquely, which means each level adds a distinct value. And if my reporting team member is very close to me, which is manager too close, that means I will end up policing this guy. I end up doing what he is doing. And in 72, I'm being polite here, in 70 to 90% of the organizations, this is a massive problem. Where managers are doing step down roles, they're stepping down, their entire time is spent on crisis management. And the moment organizations do this, and this is where, you know, the first question I had with you, can HR add to the top line? For every level that our top leaders have to step down. So let's say my organization has a maximum of 5 levels and my top leader is supposed to operate at level 5 and he is operating at level 4. My organization loses 7 to 10 times of top line and bottom line. I'm not talking percentage. I'm saying 7 to 10 times of top line and bottom line. If HR is able to put the structure correctly and man the structure correctly, it can contribute directly to the top line and bottom line of the organization. This is a very powerful method. It's called stratified systems. It has about now over 55 years research behind it. And there is enough framework and tools available to help organizations do this. There are organizations which have gone on record saying, we have adopted this process about 10 years back. We did not talk about it because it gave us a differential advantage. So that's the power of, you know, the right structure and putting the right person at the right place. I refer to this circular structure. This just details how it operates. I'll come now to the compensation one, and this is something which may be new to some of us, which is where we are saying that whatever is our organization strategy for the structure, the compensation structure would be an inverted image of that, right? So what I mean here is, if I was to look at the number of people across my pyramid, and let's say I have a perfect pyramid, then my compensation pyramid is a reverse of that. Yeah. Meaning I can pay people in the 33rd or the 50th percentile at the bottom and pay 75th to the 90th percentile at the top.
Gaurav, just a timeout. We'll have to speed up a bit. You know,
I'll just take another 5 minutes maximum.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So the moment we do this, there is a concept which is, at the end of the day, the cost of employing people remains the same across organizations. Because in organizations which have a gradual increase in compensation, wherein you can afford to pay the highest percentile at the top, you end up focusing a lot on HR processes of development, career planning, and providing employability to people. And you allow for attrition to happen so that the best of the best are the ones who rise up within your organization. I'll not get into the detail of it, but there are similar inverted images on which compensation can be done. There is entire mathematics and research behind this. Looks a little complicated, but it's not that complicated to deploy. As we look at this, the last point that I have to share with you is that when we are setting levels of compensation, we need to look at whether people feel they are fair. It's a concept called Fairfield Pay. And it says that if you're paying me 1 rupee at level 1 job, you pay me 1.5 at level 2, 6 rupees at level 3, 12 rupees at level 4. Unfortunately, at least in India, over the last 25-30 years, the compensation levels have gone up for people in level 3 and above at a much higher rate than people at level 2, and definitely at an abnormally higher rate than people at level 1. And when we are doing cost reduction, we end up targeting level 1 and 2 first, because that's where the volume is. One, it is not really the place where the problem is. And secondly, we have created a major problem for ourselves in a longer time zone, because we have started paying much higher salaries at the top. The ratio, while here I'm talking, is up to 1:24. It goes to 1:48 at level 7. In India, we are operating at almost 1:500 ratio in many organizations. So the answer is yes to cap some of the salaries at the top, but the answer also lies in raising some of the salaries at the bottom. But just salary modification is not going to help you, because it will ultimately lead to an increase in your overall cost. What needs to be done is to address all those issues around portfolio rationalization, around geographic footprint, around decision flow, around structure, around manning with the right person. So these put together are things that HR can really do and add to both the top line and bottom line of any organization. So these were some of the thoughts I had. Mandeep, we can take up some questions if we have, and take this conversation forward.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Gaurav. I think that was absolutely insightful and absolutely comprehensive. So my compliments to your presentation team and to you to take us through all this journey of yours. I've been seeing a lot of queries here on they're liking your point. The Fairfield Pay is nice, but my takeaway is I think survivability and sustainability, because we have never had such a shock in the economic system, in the full economic system. We have had sectorial shocks, but not an economic shock of this magnitude and for a country of a size of India. So what would your 2 pointers be for an CHRO who's dealing with so many multiple fires at his desk right now? What should his concentration be on if he has to be on the survival or sustainable?
See, again, as I said, it's not either or, it's and. But when he's approaching it, I think what is important is what are the principles with which the organization wishes to work? Is the principle to honor commitments to stakeholders, and that includes employees? Then we will find a way to do that, right? And I think this is generally said about values, and principles and values are somewhere connected. Value is something that you value so much that you do not compromise it even in the most difficult time, right? That is value. Now, if organizations need to find a north point at this point in time, they need to reflect back on their values and then make those decisions.
Okay, that's a good one. A second question that I wanted to check was that, again, in India, it's a very unique problem that we have certain sectors which are very high on compensation, like your IT and banking, and you have certain sectors which are very conservative in their compensation, like your manufacturing and mining. Now, and then there is a lot of cross-pollination where people are coming from one particular sector because of supply chain experience in mining into e-commerce. And when they come into e-commerce, while they have the experience of scale, the compensation offered to them, it sometimes is absolutely mind-boggling. So do you feel that, will this trend continue where certain sectors will always be on a high compensation category and certain sections will always be on a conservative compensation category or classification?
Yeah, I think that will continue. It's not going to change. Old habits die hard. So I think once things become normal, people will tend to fall back to what they were doing. But at least I see some organizations looking at this as a wake-up call and saying when we are going overboard on anything, we generally say extreme of anything is not good, right? So they will find ways. But ultimately, the capacity to pay will determine the compensation level. And like anything, a price point is determined by demand and supply. So the moment the supply of skills is on a shortage, we will see compensations going up.
Okay. And my third question and the final question before we wrap up is that a lot of the startup and the ecosystem has also impacted the compensation outlook, and valuation has become more important than profitability. You have a company which has a 1,000 crore or 2,000 crore revenue, but a $5 billion valuation, right? And that kind of is setting the a different tone for the new job seekers, because they all feel that they can set up a high value company. How do you see a CHRO who's coming into this high capacity PE driven company to drive this kind of a compensation? What discipline action should he or she take when he comes into a high capital induced company?
And again, I will avoid taking names, but they can learn from organizations which have been in the business for a while. There is a third generation business house, which was till 2012 valued at $4.7 billion. And ultimately, the promoter could cash out with 2,000 crores and his entire business has fallen. We have enough examples of people who have gone ahead, borrowed heavily for pushing growth. Their leverage was so high that today they are bankrupt, right? So I think history has a method of repeating itself. We need to take lessons from there. The moment we chase valuation, let's remember how valuations come into play. I am selling a share and someone else is buying it. That's how valuation happens. If there is no buyer of that share, there is no valuation. So ultimately, the valuation growth happens when I am selling to someone and he's selling to someone and he's selling to someone. But finally, someone makes a loss.
Right.
And I think there are enough examples, right from the portfolio of one of the biggest PE funds like SoftBank, right?
Oh, yeah.
Whether it was WeWork or whatever. There are enough examples. The moment you back organizations because of valuation, you never know when the carpet is going to be pulled under your feet. It is getting pulled under other people's feet, you're happy, but you will get your turn as well when someone pulls it under you.
Okay, I think that's a great thing. So we are in the last 4 minutes. I'm just checking. I think we have got some great comments which have come in, especially on the cost optimization and what should be the culture, which should principles that they should be there. So people have been quite active on that. My takeaway, as I summarize all this, is I like the Fairfield Pay issue, and I also like the survival and serviceability, sustainability factor which is there. And to my mind, I think now the CHRO is sitting on far too many complex problems to deal with that he was dealing 5 years back. And all the CHROs today are absolutely on their, hot seat. The seat has become hotter now. And I think now it is actually the time where they can actually make a dent and be part of that big chair or big table that they always wanted to be part of, and or they were always in the periphery of it. Because now is time where talent supply line, serviceability, and sustainability all have to come together, and the serviceability and sustainability, survivability and sustainability cannot function without the talent backbone backing it. So that's my final comment. So any last comment for you on the one liner for a CHRO who's out there looking for an answer? What would your one line of caution or one point of action for him be, or her?
See, I think any recession, slowdown, depression is short-lived as far as organizational life is concerned.
Right.
And our responses have to be made keeping that in mind.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
That's what I would
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much. We are just on time. We are at 4:58, so that is absolutely your cue that we finish this up. So thank you very much who joined us. And I think there's a lot of questions coming in, a lot of chatter over there of hiring diversified talent, hiring for Namrata made a point that Amazon hires for the whole organization, not just for the role, which is also what you highlighted. So we have created that chatter. Thank you very much for creating that chatter and putting those thoughts with us. I appreciate your time, appreciate your effort in putting the PPT together. And thank you for all of us who joined us. Thank you very much. Until next time, we'll be back again with another session and another specialist. Thank you very much. Mandeep from Hacking HR Bangalore signing off. Thank you. Thank you very much, Gaurav.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye. Take care, buddies. Take care. Thank you very much.